You know, the focus today really is about strategic directions. I know many of you weren't there at the first one, weren't there at the buffet, but Garrett Dunbar is going to focus on our strategic directions. We are not United Way. We are not Jamboree Housing. We are not, you know, even Families Forward or Elimination Foundation or any of these very well-known nonprofits. We are, you know, a pretty diverse group. We're, you know, we belong to different circles, but we have power. And how do you make a group like this? How do you empower a group like this? And so what Garrett's going to do is ask these questions. How do we leverage community support for permanent solutions that are founded in evidence-based principles? One of the things that would have become very clear to us is that housing is needed, but also needed is that community support. The community, you know, the residents, the homeowners, the rich people, have to also accept that there are going to be poor people living among us. Integrated inclusionary housing is a theory, but we want to make it a reality because we know that's how we build a better world. And so Garrett's going to ask those questions, and then it's going to be a conversation highlighting innovative, non-profit, community development organizations such as Villages at Cabrillo, Skid Row Housing Trust, and the need to form partnerships. Everything we did in the buffet of educational experiences was about partnerships and has dinned this into my head. Partnership, partnership, partnership. We had Insight Magazine, we had Career-Wise, we had, you know, Presbyterian Women of the Presbytery of Los Ranchos, Irvine for Everyone, so on and so forth. Lagoon, you know, Friendship Shelter, Jamboree Housing, they all came in as partners to offer some kind of learning for us. And so partnerships now not to learn, but strategically to provide housing, wraparound services, and this is the important part, build community for our neighbors experiencing homelessness. Sharing insights from community street outreach events, as well as a unique pilot program funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, offering holistic field-based support through intensive case management. Garrett is people-minded, environmentally conscious, involved in purposeful social action campaigns, and determined to give back to the local community. He is the founder, president of the OC Burrito Project, and a full-time personal service coordinator at Mental Health America of Los Angeles Homelessness Full Service Partnership ARCH program. I'll do Marnie later, but welcome Garrett.
Hello again. So I will, like Anita, I talk very fast, so if anyone needs to have me slow down or repeat something, please stop. Where to start? With the Orange County Burrito Project, I guess. So I moved down to Orange County a few years ago to come here for law school. I grew up in Palos Verdes, which is another very affluent community. And so growing up, my experience with homelessness was volunteering. We would do a lot of volunteer projects. We worked in soup kitchens. My family would help out during the holidays and try to make bags for people. And that was kind of where homelessness kind of was. It was like arm's distance, volunteering, trying to get college credits, trying to look good for applications. My dad is an attorney, and so I always thought that was the path that I was supposed to follow. I wasn't allowed to deviate from that path at home. It was met with a lot of resistance, especially because I'm the firstborn son, so there was a lot of, you're going to do this no matter what. I ended up kind of following along that path, going through my own journey with depression and anxiety and suffering my own mental health issues. But by the time I got to law school, I looked around and I said, why am I here? Is this really what I want to do for the next 30, 40 years of my life? And I said, not really. So I tried to find a way to make it work for me, and I ended up focusing my career on environmental law. And so I found this thing called environmental justice, which was going into low-income neighborhoods and fighting against pollution. And so I thought that was awesome. I worked for all these, thank you. I worked for all these different environmental nonprofit groups. One of them was the Surfrider Foundation down in San Clemente. I also worked for the Orange County Coastkeeper in Costa Mesa. And so I wanted to see what's the other side of this, just to get a well-rounded experience. I knew I wanted to go more on the nonprofit side, but I wanted to have that well-roundedness. So I didn't want to go so far as to work for a giant oil company, but I thought I'll take the middle ground and go something a little bit less evil. So I went with the government, which is debatably yeah. So I ended up getting an internship working at Orange County's Office of County Counsel, which is basically the in-house law firm for the county. So anytime the county gets sued, they're the ones who are showing up saying, please don't sue us, how can we settle this? My first day showing up at work, I had tons of friends that had said this is a great opportunity. I had a professor that was one of the county council guys. So he said, yeah, come do this. Not once did I hear anything about homelessness. And my first day showing up at work, the office was in the Hall of Administration in downtown Santa Ana. And this was September 2015. And so I show up my internship, park my car, I'm immediately surrounded by about 500 people that were camped all along those walkways in between all those buildings. And what I saw was people who were literally in charge of our county, walking to work every single day, ignoring the people that were sitting there outside the building, just walking head down. And something flipped in me. It was kind of my lifetime of feeling similarly ignored by what I wanted to do in my path, and just wanting to help these people who I thought their voices were just not being heard. And so I started researching, what can I do to increase community education about what's happening right here in our own backyard? If I've been living here for 3 years, going to law school, how many other people have been living here for 10, 20 years and have no idea that these things are even happening, or don't care? So I found out about this group called the Burrito Project, and they were working in LA, around the Skid Row area, and so I volunteered with them, and I said, hey, what you guys are doing is great, this is what's happening in Orange County, are you guys interested in starting a chapter? And they looked at me and they said no. And they were like, if you want to go ahead and do all this yourself, go for it. You can use Burrito Project as the name, but we're not going to help you at all. So I was like, okay, that works. So I was also working in my school's law library, and I just grabbed all the books I could find on how to start your own nonprofit in California, and just started reading and researching. So as I was going through this process, I looked up on the Secretary of State's website, and I tried to find out if they were a 501c3 nonprofit, and they actually weren't. And so I was doing all the paperwork for Orange County, and I said, hey, do you guys want me to do all the paperwork for you up in LA? And they said, no. So I thought that was odd. But I just kept on doing what I was doing. So as the Orange County Burrito Project, we are not at all affiliated with any of the other burrito projects that are popping up all over little fringe groups. We are just us. So eventually people have told me we're probably going to have to change the names for something a little different, but that'll be later. So what we started doing was I used my financial aid money from law school to just buy a whole bunch of burrito ingredients and invited people to show up to my apartment and make burritos with me. And then we drove out to the Civic Center area in Santa Ana, and we just started handing out the burritos and talking to people and saying, hi, my name's Garrett, I have a burrito, how's your day going? What are you up to? How are you out here? And just kind of learning what people were doing out there and getting familiar with names, being able to come back out, recognize people. So that started with 6 people showing up in my apartment, and we made 150 burritos. You can imagine for 500 people, 150 burritos went pretty quickly. So what I was shocked by was just how everyone out there was so incredibly thankful that we just showed up. That we were out there at 7 o'clock at night when it's dark, when no one else is out there serving food to about 500 people. And so that made me really want to come back and made me think about how do we scale this up. And so that really pushed me to get our 501c3 certification. We started inviting businesses to come and volunteer with us. We had tons of schools. I even had little Girl Scouts that came and volunteered with us, tons of groups. And it would be hilarious when I would get adults that would be afraid of going out into the encampment, and here you see some little 10-year-old girl walking straight up like, here you go, got a burrito, my name's Megan or something, And so for adults to then see that just compassion from kids, and just no fear, and that was how every event went. We never had any issue, and we always went out at night, which was what everyone was so afraid of. Was, oh, you're going out there at night, it's dark, whatever. Everyone was so thankful. And so I used these community engagement opportunities, I call them community street opportunities, to educate our communities onto what was actually happening. We were doing these events for a little over a year before we moved out of my apartment, and we moved into 4th Street Market in downtown Santa Ana because I was talking with the health department, trying to figure out where do we fall into with health permits. They told us we needed a commercial kitchen as fast as we could, so that was what we ended up doing. Let's fast forward a little bit. So we had been working for about 2 years doing this, and this was now November 2017. The Courtyard Shelter had been opened the year before, so that was the first emergency shelter that Orange County ever opened. there's some political issues with it, but anyway, it opened and it had a capacity of about 400 people. It was full in 3 days. There still was about 250, 300 people outside of the shelter, but there was no more room for it inside. So the city of Santa Ana was pretty frustrated, saying, there's still visible homelessness, we opened up the shelter, it didn't fix it, what do we do now? And so over the next year, they started this construction project in the Civic Center. So I don't know if you guys have driven by the downtown Civic Center in Santa Ana, and now there's a whole bunch of fencing, they put up some new buildings. All of that construction was kind of accelerated as a means to push homelessness out of that downtown area, because the shelter didn't solve it. So we kept serving our burritos outside of the shelter to the people who were left outside who weren't able to access the resources inside of the shelter. And what ended up happening was the city thought that we were a toxic charity and that we were feeding the pigeons. And so what the city did was the city of Santa Ana passed an emergency ordinance that said no more volunteer services could be provided to the homeless without approval from the city manager. And so they passed this ordinance on a Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, I called the city manager's office and I said, what's the permit process and how do we fix this? And he had no idea what I was talking about. There was no permit in place. He didn't even know about the ordinance being passed, nothing. So I, with my law school background, I spent the entire month of December creating this permit process for the city. They were throwing every curveball at us to try and get us to stop. They were saying, you're going to have to comply with the Santa Ana Police Department, and if there are any overtime hours for officers, you're going to have to pay for that. And I was like, well, that's not in our budget. Like, this isn't going to work. Thankfully, we didn't need to pay for any overtime hours. So then they sent us to the fire department and said, if we have to close any streets, you're going to have to pay for street closures. The fire department was like, you guys are fine, you're walking on sidewalks. And then they wanted they wanted to figure out what we were going to do with all the trash. So I was like, well, that's cool because I'm in environmental law concentration. So here's my waste mitigation plan. And the city attorney approved it, and so we got to do our events. And so they finally gave us a permit for January of 2018. We had permitted events for January, February, and March. And then in April, the city of Santa Ana said, thank you for your 3+ years of service, but we figured out homelessness, so you guys don't need to come back anymore. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, because we were just out there and there's still 300 people outside. So what they did was Easter weekend, they put up fencing around the Plaza of Flags and stationed a bunch of police officers around that plaza to forcibly evict everyone that remained. And this was kind of going hand in hand with the riverbed evictions that were happening in January of 2018, that were kind of motivated a little bit by Disneyland and Angel Stadium, who kind of fund things in the city of Anaheim. But visible homelessness has been growing steadily to a breaking point in Orange County. And now we're at this point where we really don't know what to do with it. We know that it's an issue, clearly, we can see it, but we're really struggling to find solutions. And so where we can take some of the solutions that have worked, after I graduated law school, I worked with Legal Aid Society, and we were inside of that courtyard shelter every Thursday morning trying to provide legal access to people. And people are getting tickets for ridiculous things. Just being in a park after hours, citation. Illegally storing personal belongings on public property, citation. You have a glass of wine with dinner. They would like to have a glass of wine with dinner too. They just happen to have their glass of wine with dinner in a park, and now they're getting an open container ticket. So all of these tickets add up. And we as taxpayers are really funding these systems. And you heard that $29 million goes towards San Francisco. Does anyone know how much goes towards Orange County? It's $299 million are spent every year in Orange County on police, on emergency services and hospitals, on public works projects to clean up, on everything that you see except for housing. Zero of that $299 million went towards permanent supportive housing. And so after I graduated law school, I worked at Legal Aid Society, I saw all these problems, I said, how do we help people more? And so I ended up getting an internship with where I work now, which is called Mental Health America of Los Angeles. And I put the Burrito Project stuff on hold with the idea of incorporating what I do now back into the Burrito Project. And so what I do now is I'm a part of a field-based team. And on our team, we have 8 people. We're funded by the Department of Mental Health in LA County. And we're based out of Long Beach, but we serve all of what's called SPA 8, or Service Planning Area 8, which covers from Long Beach up to El Segundo and kind of inland towards like Compton-ish area. And it's a big area. And for the Department of Mental Health, they want us to have a ratio of about 10 individuals for each staff, because the goal for our program is to try and get the people who are the least likely to access services independently, the people who have been outside the longest. And the majority of people that I work with are older adults. I work with people that are ages from 40 to 68 is kind of our average. The youngest person that we work with is 26 years old, but that's very low. The oldest person we work with is 68 years old, and thankfully he is in housing. But there are other people that are around his age that are not in housing. And so what we do as a field-based team is we have a nurse, we have a clinician, and we have a therapist, and then we have what are called personal service coordinators. And we can all go out to where people are in their encampments or wherever that may be, if they're under a bridge or off the side of a riverbed, and we can deliver those services right there. And then we can link people to different programs, like more to increase their financial stability, to get them connected to different housing resources and voucher programs that are available for people. The criteria to get onto our team, being a mental health agency, is you have to have a significant and persistent mental health issue. So we were able to get a different kind of voucher. It's called a shelter plus care voucher. And so the shelter element is the housing, and the care element is us and our team. And so we continue to provide these mobile mental health services. And a lot of the people that we work with also have physical health issues, you can imagine, from being outside and having extended periods of time without going to a doctor. So we're able to then link people to different medical agencies that we work with through different partnerships. And so we were able to use that. The children's clinic that's over there at that Villages of Cabrillo, they operate a few different sites throughout Long Beach, and we're able to utilize them. And their doctors have an amazing relationship with us. We really communicate about what's going on so we can holistically deal with someone's health, both physical and mental health. Once we get them into housing, our support doesn't end there. It's not like, here's the keys, see you later, you're good now. We continue our support because that's what people need. Every aspect of our program is under kind of this guiding principle of whatever it takes. So we don't just go away with someone because they're being difficult or because they scream or yell at us. Yesterday, I was with someone for about 6 hours going to the DMV to get their ID card, and then going to the Department of Social Services to try and get them connected to general relief funds and also EBT or food stamp funds. And she is someone who is highly paranoid schizophrenic, so you can imagine going into government buildings was a huge issue for her. Getting her just off the riverbed to go with me to these places was an amazing step. And it was absolutely incredible for her to go through these things. But it was, yeah, we were able to get it done. And the reason why is because she's recently been linked to a housing voucher. And to get connected to the housing voucher, you have to be document ready. And what that means is you need a copy of your ID, your social security card, and your birth certificate. You can imagine for someone who's been chronically homeless 3 to 5 years, those documents are long gone, and you're gonna have to do a lot of work to try and get them. Also for someone who's living on the streets, theft is a really big reality. Being a victim of crime is a huge reality. And so even if you go with someone to take them to the DMV, the possibility that they're going to be attacked and have their things stolen is very real. And so we've had people where we're going to the DMV multiple times just in 1 month to try and get them connected to another ID because their stuff had been taken. People who are on government benefits who cash a check and then they just are walking around with an envelope of cash all month, they're a huge target. So the first of the month is a big stressful time for people. And if you didn't have a mental health issue before you became homeless, you can imagine that being homeless for an extended period of time would make you have those paranoid thoughts, would make you feel depressed. And at some point, it's really easy to lose that hope that your situation can change. And what we're here to do as a community is to restore that hope. And through these bags, through the interactions that we have with people, we can really restore that hope. And it's moving towards more positive solutions that we've seen that can integrate into our community seamlessly, like the Villages at Cabrillo, like Wise Place, like the Friendship Shelter. The Skid Row Housing Trust is another organization that's based out of Skid Row, and one of my favorite buildings that they have is called the Star Apartments. And you can watch the video on YouTube of them putting it together. It's about 90 seconds. So it was all prefabbed buildings. So they just did a giant concrete superstructure and then ordered all these prefab buildings off-site and then craned them in and put it all together. And it was not only a cost-effective project, but it also happened much faster than typical construction. I know I'm out of time and I'm so sorry, but I just want to finish this. What they've been able to do is, I believe there are 60 residents that live at that facility. And at the bottom level, they have services and social workers, mobile health teams like us that are connected to that location. And they also do job training and other things that are based out of that location. But for the residents that are there, you would drive past that building and have no idea that 60 people who were formerly experiencing homelessness are living there. And that's what's the amazing thing, is that we can have that in our communities too. We can have all of these buildings where you would have no idea that it's something that's housing formerly homeless individuals, and it's right there. And where that can happen is with us and changing the mindset that our communities have, which is very stigmatizing, very negative, and it's just not helpful. Because at the end of the day, we only have two choices. What we have now, or what we can become. And if we can become something that seamlessly integrates our struggling community members back into us, and really creates that hope, and really develops that sense of community, we can end homelessness. The difficult part is addressing the cause. And the cause is a lot of times incomes that don't match, rental prices that don't match. More people are renting in Orange County than are homeowners. And so you can imagine that when rent goes up and jobs don't go up as much for pay, we're going to see more homelessness. Two of the fastest growing groups of homelessness right now, and then I'll stop. Two of the fastest growing groups right now are seniors and young families. Seniors who didn't save enough for retirement, that then are getting charged a lot of rent, and Social Security isn't able to meet ends meet, retirement benefits aren't able to meet ends meet. That's one of the groups that we're seeing out there a lot because of their physical health issues. And then the other group are young families who their incomes are not enough to stabilize them if an emergency strikes. So they're one car accident away or one medical emergency away from really struggling. And it's a slippery slope from when you're staying in an apartment, getting an eviction, to living in your car, to then having your car taken from you on the street, to then being on the street. And you can imagine it's a very realistic situation that a lot of our community members are facing.
Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah, that'll